Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Well, our guest today is going to tell us about a time of the year that is the holiest time of the year for Muslims in our community. Imam Omer Bajwa, who's the chaplain and director of Muslim life at Yale's chaplain's office, is here to tell us about Ramadan, which we're in the early stages of. Welcome, Omar. So nice to meet you and have you in the studio.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay, so Ramadan is the holiest month of the Muslim calendar.
Yes.
And a lot takes place in that month, including, I guess, what a lot of us in modern America care a lot about eating.
Yes.
And so one of the big things is that you have a sun up, to sundown fast every day. What are the other key aspects of Ramadan?
So I would say fasting is definitely the one of the primary aspects in that, the sort of what everything that entails the physical fast. Other parts of it, which we can get into and talk about, are Ramadan is connected with the revelation of the Holy Quran, which is Islam's scripture. And so in Ramadan, every night of this month, you have special prayers, special optional prayers that take place in mosques and campuses and people's houses, where the imam or whoever's leading the prayer will recite, ideally 1/30 of the Quran. If you divide the Quran into 30 portions and you recite 1/30th of it every night over the course of the month, you have recited and have heard and listened to and experienced
in Arabic.
In the entire Quran in Arabic, exactly.
And how long does that take to recite 1/30th?
I mean, on average, it takes an hour plus, maybe an hour and a half, because it's a part of the prayer. So there's other, ritual aspects of the prayer. So I'd say about 90 minutes on a mosque on average speed. And so obviously it doesn't have to be. That's if you're doing it in a mosque and doing 1/30th. So people are encouraged to recite whatever they know. So many people will recite at home with their family, with their loved ones. That was especially the case during COVID, when mosques were closed and whatnot. So the idea there is really to reconnect with the Quran in the original Arabic. And then with that, there's many classes that are taught, and now on streaming and Facebook and Instagram, many people offer like little lessons on different chapters and messages of the Quran, so that it's sort of very spiritually and intellectually edifying.
There are 5 prayer times a day, correct?
Yes.
For a practicing Muslim. The service at which you do the up to 90 minutes of Quran recital, is that after sundown?
That's actually after the evening prayer. So you have the 5th prayer of the evening, which is called the Isha prayer, and then immediately after that you would do this extra prayer.
So you know why I'm asking.
Yeah.
That.
Oh, so in terms of reciting while you're fasting, yeah, that would be very difficult. I will say I have not memorized the Quran. It's a goal of mine to achieve someday, but my best friends who are imams have memorized the Quran, and it's a really incredible accomplishment.
And is there a trope? Is there a musical component to how it's recited?
No, there is a cadence to it, though, and there are different styles of reciting the Quran, and it's fascinating. There's West African style, there's North African style, there's South Asian, Egyptian, Gulf Arab, there's Indonesian style. So really, when you spread across the global Muslim community, you see that it's almost like different regional styles come up, and all of them, they're based on an orthodox reading of the Quran. But different cultures have different ways of inflecting and whatnot. So there's a whole, like, if an ethnomusicologist would have a field day studying the variety of the sounds and the
But I was wondering, if you're so
of the
hungry
Quran.
From fasting all day,
Yes.
people
Yes.
are willing to wait another 90 minutes to eat.
No, so what happens is that this is after you break your fast.
Oh, after you break your fast.
After you break your fast. I should have clarified. So you break your fast, and what I meant to say is that many of my friends who lead in the mosque, they will review, but you have to review every night before you go on stage, so to speak, right? Before you're in front of the congregation. And that you're doing while you're fasting. So, you're by yourself, you're really sort of revising and reviewing, sort of before you sort of before you perform it. But yes, the congregational prayer would be after sundown, after everyone is eaten and hydrated and rested a bit.
And what always impressed me is the 5 times a day at prescribed times Muslims pray. So Jews, we do it 3 times a day. But we fudge a little. We do the second and third together. Like you time it usually around sundown. So your afternoon prayer is right before sundown, and your evening one is right after. You have 5 distinct times.
Yes.
So practicing Muslims I know, they'll stop work and bring out a prayer mat.
Yes.
Prayer rug. How often do they? I know sometimes you have to get to the mosque by certain times. Usually once or twice a day in the mosque, and then otherwise you do it where you are.
It's a good question. So generally speaking, it's encouraged to pray in a mosque as much as you're able to, but you're not required to. Of the 5 daily prayers, you can pray them anywhere, in your office, in the park, in your house, at work, in the library, wherever you find yourself. And it's time for the prayer, and you have a window in which you offer the prayer each of the 5 times. And so going to the mosque is wonderful. But, I think sort of the hustle of modern American life, of modern life, is that many of us aren't close to a mosque in our day-to-day. With the exception of the Friday prayer. The Friday noon prayer is the congregational prayer where you're supposed to go to the mosque for the Friday noon prayer. Yep.
And what's beautiful partly about it is that busyness of daily life. There's still this commitment to carving out 5 times a day that has a rhythm. And it kind of reminds you, does this work for you? Because this works for me when I do my daily prayers as a Jew. Besides having structure in your life, you're having a practice that removes you from the blinding daily routine.
Absolutely.
And says, who am I? What am I part of? And why am I alive?
Absolutely.
So when I'm thinking about Ramadan, I'm thinking about 5 times a day you do that. And you have to be aware of the time's correct because isn't it pegged to the sun up, sundown?
Yes.
What happens when you say those prayers on Ramadan? What extra happens that doesn't happen the other 11 months besides the fact that there's an extra prayer, besides the fact that you're reciting the Quran?
No, it's a great question. I think what happens for a lot of people, and what I would want to mention up front is that, fasting in Ramadan is the Muslim modality of fasting. Like one of the verses of the Quran that establishes the obligatory and the spiritual commandment of Ramadan and fasting. Actually, Muslims believe that God is saying in the Quran that fasting is prescribed for this community as it was prescribed for previous communities. The point there, and then I'll answer your question, is that Muslims see fasting as a very powerful and ancient spiritual and physical practice that many other communities have had and continue to have. And so what I would connect that with is that what I've experienced, what many people, sort of share their experiences as well, is that when you're fasting, there's a heightened awareness, right? Literally at a visceral, physiological level, you're feeling thirsty, you're feeling fatigued, the hunger. And when we talk about what is prayer, prayer is communicating with the divine. Prayer is showing appreciation and gratitude. Prayer is sharing your worries, your anxieties, talking to God, right? Talking to the divine. And when you're in already a state of deprivation, of hunger, of thirst, of fatigue, of vulnerability, we would say, that I would say that adds another dimension to the daily prayers, that people have expressed that they feel, they feel more in tune in a sense when they're
connected to your soul, connected to God, however
exactly.
you feel the prayer. I was thinking, because we don't have as many prayer days, we have a couple of required ones and then some minor fasts in Judaism, and we have a 25-hour one for Yom Kippur. When you get to those last hours, where you haven't eaten, you haven't drank. It's so interesting in our traditions, Jewish and Muslim, they don't have us drink water, which is always surprising.
Yeah.
I'd like to know a little more about that. But when you get to the end and the sun's starting to come down, and you're saying those last prayers, there's an intensity. There's a connection to your soul or whatever you're connecting to spiritually that seems to go part and parcel, that kind of takes us out of our body a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say the exact same thing in the Muslim practice, for sure.
And we're talking to Imam Omer Bajwa, who is the chaplain of the Chaplain's Office Director of Muslim Life at Yale. And we're talking about Ramadan. Starts April 1st, ends May 2nd?
It started on April 2nd. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Now, is it true that you're not always sure the exact day until it's coming up, or do you know for the next 10 years what the date's going to be?
It's a great question. There's two answers to that, in that there's two different opinions in sort of traditional Islamic law. One opinion, which is the more common traditional opinion, is that it's based on Islam follows the lunar calendar, and it's a lunar, and Judaism also has a lunar calendar, with the difference being that Judaism has, from my understanding, built-in sort of correctives on certain dates.
I think if I have the numbers right, it's 7 out of every 16. I got the number wrong now. I think 7 out of every 18 years we throw an extra month in.
Okay, sure.
So that we're more in tune, so that the spring type festivals are happening in spring.
Precisely.
But you folks change all year, so Ramadan can be winter, summer, fall, spring, which is really interesting.
Yes, no, thank you. So in Islam, it's a pure lunar calendar, which a lunar calendar is typically 354 days, as opposed to a 365-day Gregorian solar calendar. So the takeaway is that on average, every year, from year to year, Ramadan moves backwards, right? It migrates backwards in the calendar by about 10 days. And so what happens is that over the course of a 33-year cycle, right, is that you will find, Ramadan will go all the way through the calendar year. And so what I was saying is that one of the major opinions is that you go on moon sighting. So we know astronomically when the new moon is going to be born, right? We know like where it's going to be in the horizon, in the sky, what part of the earth you can see it on. We have all these fancy moon charts. And so what happens is it's a tradition, it's a prophetic practice to go out with your community to see, on the clear horizon, to try to see the moon.
What if it's cloudy?
Well, that's exactly. So, I mean, you do it locally, and then, people in the next town, and the next town, and the next locality, all across America would look for it. And scholars have defined sort of America as it's a big country, 3,000 miles coast to coast, right? So to be honest, it is oftentimes difficult to see in New England. And a lot of the reports we get are actually from California,
but
from Southern California.
Like a month ago, did you know what day you were going to start fasting?
So what happened is that I follow a lunar calendar. I wait for reports from anywhere in the U.S., but there are people that we know by mathematical calculations when the new moon is going to start, on what day, at what time. And there are people that just have a fixed calendar. They know that exactly Ramadan, according to the calculation method, will start on this day and will end on this day. So you have two approaches.
Because we have similar arguments in Judaism.
Sure.
So we also were waiting for that sighting of the first moon.
Yes.
I'm going to get this a little wrong, but in the old days before calendars and and electronics, thousands of years ago, they used to pass through, I think, smoke signals from town to town. Do I have this right? When the moon was sighted.
Okay.
So that's why we have these odd laws in Judaism that some of us argue aren't useful anymore, which is that if you don't live in Israel where it starts and the sighting is, we have 2 days for a lot of our holidays and holy days.
Okay.
Not Yom Kippur, but on a lot of them, and even for some of the beginning of the new month, because the argument is that it took that time to spread the word of when the moon was sighted. And some of us think that's a little bit ridiculous because now we can instantly know what's happening around the world. But I think our traditions like to stay rooted in how we did things and evolve more gradually because there's some wisdom and some collected experience that comes into play.
For sure. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of Judaism, but from the Islamic perspective, one of the arguments that people say on why we should keep the prophetic practice of the moon sighting around, which I actually believe, and this is a convincing argument to me, is that, it's a sign from God, like the moon, the sun, all of these are signs and creations of God. And by us foregoing that, we're disconnecting from our connection to nature, right? That God has created this and we live in a natural world and ecosystem, and we stay connected to that by remembering these great symbols that God gives us.
I love that.
So,
and I also love the idea of being reminded who we are.
Yes.
And that we're a tiny speck of something much bigger that has a lot of... So I'm very interested in how... And I love this too, that, some people like the same holiday to be the same season. They have their memories, but there's something beautiful about it evolving and being different this times of year. So obviously there are big implications for how long you have to fast.
Yes.
If you're fasting sundown to sunup, you just missed the time change this year, right? So that means you have a very long fast. Like, what time did it start this morning? What time does it end?
It started around 5 a.m. and it ends at almost 7:30 today. Yeah.
So what's the strategy for how you get through a day?
So
doing it for 31 days is a big commitment.
For sure.
I mean, I couldn't imagine doing that. It'd be hard.
No, I appreciate that. So, I'm a very practical person. My teachers are very practical. And so I give very practical advice to my community, to my students, is that there is a prophetic practice. The prophet encouraged people to wake up before dawn to have a pre-dawn meal. And it's really important. It's said to be a time of blessings, that the angels pray for the people that get up at that time. Also, from a very pragmatic point of view, you need to sort of have good caloric intake at the beginning of the day. Eat a good, hearty, nutritious breakfast before you start your fast, before dawn. And then, you're going to fast for 16 hours. And so the key is really hydration. Is that I think many people, I'll speak only about myself, is for me, after day 1 or day 2, 2 things happen. I love coffee and I drink a lot of coffee, and I go cold turkey when it's Ramadan. So the first day you have those little coffee withdrawal headaches, but your body acclimates and adjusts. And then really you're hungry the first day, but then your body also adjusts to sort of the...
Right, because we know that our bodies can definitely do that.
Yes.
People sometimes get in regular fasting practices for their whole lives, so like 3 days at a time.
Precisely. And then, the body goes into ketosis and all of that. For me, the biggest challenge is actually the thirst.
Yes.
I get very thirsty.
And I never understood that about Judaism and Islam. Why our fast days don't include water. And I always wondered, was there something they didn't know scientifically back then? Or that's probably not true. They could see how the body works.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I think when both of our faiths, it's coming from a divine instruction, right? And I think it's that, if fasting as a practice is about total self-discipline, and deprivation is a good word here, is that you are very self-consciously controlling what goes into your body. And so why not put food and drink in the same category, right? Is that you just have to control it.
So how do you deal with the hydration thing? Do you drink a lot?
I drink a lot of water. Yeah, you drink coconut water. Coconut water is very hydrating. One of the secrets that my friends who are doctors say, drink Pedialyte. Pedialyte has a lot of electrolytes in it. Drink that in the morning, then you drink at night after sundown. And so the key really to the pro tip, as they say, is really hydrate well in the morning, hydrate when you break your fast in the evening, and then keep drinking up until you go to sleep. have a bottle of water, keep drinking up until the time that you go to sleep, and then when you wake up, just keep drinking again. You need to basically get in as many fluids as you can in the evening
Boy,
hours.
that feeling when you break the fast.
Yes.
You can really appreciate your food. I don't know about
Absolutely.
you. I don't feel like I need to eat a lot.
Yes.
It's more like I savor the bites more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I just put this on my Instagram the other day. I read it from one of my teachers that, and I'll share it here. The idea, to your point, is that, we fast for over 15 hours a day, but after 15 minutes of eating, we're satiated, we're filled. And so I think it speaks to sort of the fleeting nature of the pleasure of this world, the transience of this life, right? Is that we look at the world. The world is beautiful. The world is enticing. The world is comforting. But it's also about understanding the nature of reality and the nature of life. Is that all of that beauty, all of that comfort, all of that luxury, all of the deliciousness and the delectability, right, of the comforts of this world are also fleeting. They're transient, and that teaches us sort of a deeper lesson that life has other purposes and meanings behind it besides. And there's no doubt the food tastes delicious, and that first sip of water, right? The Prophet would break his fast with milk or water and dates. And dates are fascinating as a fruit because they're actually very good, healthy sugars and carbohydrates that give you instant energy. You drink it mixed with milk or water and you feel instantly energized. And what that does is that there's a prayer that the Prophet would say at the time of opening the fast, thanking God, expressing appreciation and gratitude for giving us food. So one of the other things that fasting teaches us, in all traditions, I may, argue, is that fasting really teaches a deeper sense of empathy with the hungry, with the houseless, with those who are food insecure. Is that by doing it, by putting myself voluntarily in a situation of doing without, that should ideally engender a deeper empathetic sort of mindset in me, so that when I look at the world and I look at around the world and I look at my own community in New Haven, that there are people that are food insecure, that are hungry day in and day out, not by choice, right, by circumstance. And so that should build a better human connection.
That is beautiful. And that's part of what I sometimes see as one of our positive goals for religion is to understand who we are as people and why to be alive. Yes,
absolutely.
And we're talking about that with Imam Omer Bajwa, who's the director of Muslim Life in the Chaplain's office at Yale University, about Ramadan. Do you get excited when Ramadan's coming?
I do. It's my favorite time of the year.
Why is that?
It is absolutely. I think just because it's a very spiritual time of the year, and Muslims believe that not only are the blessings of Ramadan, for our community, they're for the entire world. And I think that if we as Muslims really heed the lessons of Ramadan, of, like I talked about, compassion, of empathy, of God consciousness, of gratitude, of appreciating and honoring the dignity and humanity of other people, is that these are lessons that if we take to heart, it's like an annual reminder. And in many ways, it's described, and I accept this, my teachers taught it this way, it's a spiritual boot camp. I need to sort of, we all need regular reminders to sort of whip ourselves back into shape, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
I need it several times a day, for sure.
I think all of us are
starting the day is helpful.
Yes.
To say the words.
Yes.
So I'm glad. So it's a nice time for you this time
Absolutely,
of year.
yeah.
Any special activities take place like tonight where you're going to break the fast?
Yeah, so tonight I alternate between 3 places. Sometimes I break the fast in the community with a mosque, and there's actually several mosques around the New Haven area.
George Street or
exactly.
Dixwell?
George Street is the major one in downtown in New Haven, and there's about 5 in the Greater New Haven area between
Dixwell
Hamden.
Avenue, Hamden, UNH, right?
Yep. There's UNH. There's one in North Haven, the Turkish mosque. There's 2 in Hamden, and then there's the one in George Street behind St. Rafe's. And so I actually, because I know all these communities, so I circulate around, go to different mosques at different times. I also do pretty regularly with my students on campus, and then obviously with my family. So tonight I'll be with my family. So it'll
do you
be
have
nice.
any special plans?
No, I mean, I don't want to think about food right now.
Yeah,
It'll make me hungry.
About food now. Let's talk about where you grew up.
Sure. I grew up in my family's originally from Pakistan. I was born in Pakistan. I migrated to the U.S. My father's a physician. We came here for his residency. We lived in New York. We lived in Brooklyn actually for a while, and then my father got a job in upstate New York. So Binghamton, New York is what I call my hometown. I grew up there.
That's where you went to college, right?
Yep. I grew up in Binghamton, elementary school, junior high, high school. I went to college there as well. My wife is also from there. And then I went to Cornell for grad school. And then 14 years ago, moved to New Haven to take the job at Yale.
You've been here 14 years?
Yes.
Wow. How are you liking it?
Oh, I love it. I love New Haven. I love the work that I do at Yale.
And have you been Muslim your whole life?
Yes.
And was you always a practicing Muslim? Did you always do the daily prayer and everything?
Yeah, I mean, my parents were quite practicing and observant, and so I grew up in an observant household. And I think everyone comes to their own spiritual awakening. And I think mine really, I mean, I can remember the time, it was when I was 15. Like my parents we would pray and fast and all of that. And I went through the motions, when I was younger. But I think, at least personally, at the age of 15, 16, when I was in high school, I very much decided that this is what I want to do.
Do you remember a moment or anything?
Honestly, it was my best friend in high school. He went and memorized the Quran, and he took a break. He took a gap year in high school. He was a year older than me. He took a gap year, went to Pakistan, memorized the Quran in a year, which is actually extraordinary. Most people take 2 years. And he came back, and he was totally transformed. He was a very different person in a beautiful way. He was just more thoughtful, more gentle, just such a better human being. And I was like, what? I mean, in a good way, like, what happened to you? And then he was like, I could tell that he had a spiritual awakening and really connected with the Quran and with his teachers, with his imams. And I was honestly looking back when I was 15, I said, I don't know exactly what it is, but I want that. Like I felt very impacted by
So what
his
changed?
change.
Were you already praying daily? Were you already fasting on Ramadan?
I was praying and fasting, but I think there was a moment where I then, sort of the switch went on in my heart, so to speak, where I said, I really want to learn more about this and be much more intentional and conscious about doing this. The other part of the story is that my grandfather lived in Pakistan, and I would visit. It's my father's father, my paternal grandfather, and my father always made an effort when we were able to visit. He would always take us back and visit. And so I spent that summer when I was 15, just 3 months in between high school with him, and it was transformative. He was a really extraordinary human being, and I just saw the power of faith and social work and humanitarian work and social justice work in his life. And that was also, I think both of these happened at the same time when I was in high school. And that was also very powerful for me to see a man who was deeply loved and respected for his knowledge. He was a veterinarian. He grew up in the village and really took care of and would, dispense medicines and really take care of people and was very charitable and humanitarian. And it was really, I saw the time. I mean, my room was above his room, and he would wake me up for the prayers when I was 15, and we'd walk to the mosque together, and he had a cane, and I would walk and hold his arm. And I think that had an impact on me where I was like, this is a man that's motivated really by faith, and that makes him who he is. And I was like, that's what I'm also, I was very impressed by that.
All right. Well, we're running out of time. Omer Bajwa, it was so nice to chat with you a little bit. Thanks for letting us know more deeply about Ramadan.
My absolute pleasure.
I hope you have easy fast and a
Thank
really
you.
meaningful month.
Thank you so much.
And we're going to take a break now. Harry Drost, I'm alerting him that we're going to take a break and we're going to come back. We're going to talk to Ernest Pagan, the business representative of the North Atlantic States Council of Carpenters and a commissioner of New Haven City Plan Commission. So hold tight. We're probably going to take a break here with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew, How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. And hold tight. We'll be back in 5 minutes at WNHH's Dateline New Haven.